September 1939. A Polish 7TP tank commander crouches inside his turret somewhere in western Poland. Outside, the world is ending. German artillery shells explode across the fields. Smoke, thick, choking, black smoke rolls across the battlefield like a living thing. Inside the tank, it's worse than blind. It's claustrophobic terror at 20 miles per hour. But this commander has something no one else on Earth has seen before. He reaches up and rotates a simple periscope mounted in his turret roof. As he turns it, he can see behind him. All around him, a full 360-degree view without moving an inch from his seat, without opening a hatch, without exposing himself to the machine gun fire that's turning his tank into a metal coffin. It seems impossible. Every other tank commander on the planet has to choose. Stay safe and stay blind, or pop your head out and hope you don't catch a bullet. But not him. This Polish tanker is using an invention that will save thousands of lives in the war to come. An invention so revolutionary that within 5 years every major army in the world will be using it. The British will copy it. The Soviets will steal it. The Americans will manufacture it by the thousands. And the man who invented it? He sold the patent for 1 zloty, the equivalent of 20 cents. This is the story of Rudolf Gundlach and the periscope that changed armored warfare forever. To understand why Gundlach's invention was revolutionary, you need to understand what it was like inside a tank in the 1930s. Imagine climbing into a steel box. It's cramped, hot. The engine roars behind you at a volume that makes your ears ring. The smell of diesel fuel, hot metal, and gun smoke fills your nostrils. You can barely move without hitting something. An ammunition rack, another crew member. The sharp edge of a hatch mechanism. Now try to see outside. You can't. Not really. Early tanks had vision slits, narrow gaps in the armor that let you peek outside. But these were death traps. Enemy infantry learned quickly. Find the vision slit, stick a rifle barrel through it, or better yet, throw in a grenade. The British Mark I tanks of World War I had vision slits that allowed enemy bullets to ricochet inside the tank, killing crew members who thought they were safe. So engineers added periscopes. Simple devices with mirrors at angles letting you look out while staying protected. Submarines had been using them since the late 1800s. The concept was sound, but there was a problem. Actually, there were several problems. First, periscopes in 1930s tanks were fixed in position. If you wanted to look forward, you had one periscope. If you wanted to look to the side or rear, you needed completely different periscopes mounted in different locations. Most tank turrets had 3 or 4 periscopes scattered around, each showing a narrow slice of the battlefield. This meant tank commanders were constantly moving around inside their cramped turrets, pressing their faces against different eyepieces, trying to piece together a mental picture of what was happening outside. In combat, when every second counted, this was madness. Second, early tank turrets were small, incredibly small by modern standards. The typical light tank of the 1930s had a turret barely wider than a telephone booth. 2 men crammed inside, the commander and the gunner, with ammunition, guns, radio equipment, and all those fixed periscopes taking up precious space. The commander couldn't just walk around to see what was behind the tank. The turret was too small. The seats were often bolted down. You sat in one position and stayed there because there simply wasn't room to do anything else. Third, battlefields are obscured. Always. When you fire a tank gun, smoke erupts from the barrel. When the enemy fires at you, their shells kick up dust and debris. When artillery lands nearby, the air fills with dirt, smoke, and burning vegetation. When you're advancing, your own engine exhaust create a haze. When the tank in front of you moves, its tracks throw up dust that can blind you for minutes at a time. Add in actual smoke screens. Both sides use them constantly, and you have battles fought in near total obscurity. Tank commanders in World War I and the Spanish Civil War reported that visibility could drop to just a few meters. You'd be driving blind, hoping you didn't crash into a crater, a tree, or worse, an enemy tank. And that's where the killing happened. Not from the big, dramatic tank-on-tank duels. From accidents. From driving into obstacles you couldn't see. From getting ambushed because you didn't spot the anti-tank gun hidden in the smoke. From friendly fire because you couldn't identify targets properly. In Poland in the early 1930s, Army engineers understood this problem intimately. Poland was caught between 2 hostile powers, Nazi Germany to the west and Soviet Russia to the east. War was coming. Everyone knew it. The question wasn't if, but when. Poland couldn't compete on numbers. They couldn't build as many tanks as Germany or Russia. They couldn't afford the massive industrial programs their neighbors were pursuing. So they had to be smarter. They had to innovate. And in 1934, a 42-year-old engineer named Rudolf Gundlach had an idea that his colleagues said was impossible. "You can't make a periscope rotate 360 degrees, they told him. "The image will rotate with it. The observer will see the world spinning upside down. Besides," they added, "even if you could somehow keep the image stable, allowing the commander to look backward through the same periscope, that requires moving your eyepiece or having two separate eyepieces. Too complicated. Too expensive. Too fragile for combat." Rudolf Gundlach looked at the cramped interior of the TKS tankette prototype he was working on and thought, there has to be a better way. Rudolf Gundlach was born on March 28, 1892, in Wyskitki, a small town in what was then the Russian Empire. His father was a Lutheran pastor. His family valued education, discipline, and practical problem-solving, values that would serve Rudolf well. He attended gymnasium in Łódź, one of the great industrial cities of the Russian Empire. From 1903 to 1911, he excelled in mathematics and physics. In 1911, he entered Riga Technical University to study engineering. But his education was interrupted in 1916 when he was conscripted into the Russian army. The experience of war shaped him. He graduated from a non-commissioned officer's school of artillery and served in the 8th Heavy Artillery Brigade. He learned about targeting, about observation, about the deadly importance of seeing the enemy before they see you. When the Russian Empire collapsed in 1917, Gundlach joined the Union of Military Poles and helped organize artillery units for the Polish Fur Corps. By November 1918, as Poland declared independence, Gundlach enlisted in the new Polish army. The young nation immediately found itself fighting for survival. The Polish-Soviet War of 1919–1921 saw Gundlach commanding a column of military vehicles. He learned about logistics, about keeping machines running under impossible conditions, about the gap between engineering theory and combat reality. After the war, he pursued his education again, finishing studies at the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering of the Warsaw University of Technology in 1925. Curiously, he never took the final diploma exam. He was too busy working on actual military projects to bother with the formality of a degree. By 1930, Captain Gundlach was working in the engineering department of the Ministry of Military Affairs. In 1931, he became head of the Armored Weapons Construction Bureau. By December 1934, he led the design and construction department of the Armored Weapons Technical Research Bureau. This wasn't just a desk job. Gundlach was hands-on. He was the chief designer of the Ursus WZ-29 armored car. He supervised design work for the 7TP light tank, Poland's best armored vehicle, and he was constantly looking for ways to improve crew survivability and combat effectiveness. That's when he started working on the periscope problem. The technical challenge was formidable. A traditional periscope uses two mirrors or prisms set at 45-degree angles. Light enters the top, bounces off the upper mirror down a tube, hits the lower mirror and comes out the eyepiece. Simple, effective, but if you rotate that entire assembly, the image rotates too. Turn the periscope 90 degrees and suddenly what was up becomes sideways. Turn it 180 degrees and you're looking at an upside-down world. For a tank commander trying to spot targets in combat, this was useless. Gundlach's breakthrough was elegant. He designed an optical system that split into two separate parts, the objective part at the top and the ocular part at the bottom. The objective could rotate independently while keeping the image stable through a clever arrangement of prisms. The entire unit could spin a full 360 degrees while the observer saw a perfectly oriented image, but he went further. He added a second eyepiece. Now the commander could look forward through one eyepiece, then, without rotating the periscope at all, look backward through the second eyepiece. The same periscope gave him views in opposite directions. Think about what this meant in practical terms. A tank commander could now scan his entire surroundings from a single, comfortable position. He could rotate the periscope with one hand, checking all directions in seconds, If he spotted something behind the tank, he didn't need to awkwardly crane his neck or move to a different periscope. He just looked through the rear eyepiece. For the first time in armored warfare history, one man could maintain 360-degree situational awareness from a fixed position inside a tiny turret. Gundlach filed for the patent in 1936. On June 14, 1935, the Polish Army officially adopted it as the Reversible Periscope G-734. First vehicles to receive it were the TKS tankettes and the 7TP light tanks, the backbone of Poland's armored forces. Now came the question, what to do with this invention? Poland and Britain had a pre-war military cooperation agreement. British officers who saw demonstrations of the 7TP tank were impressed. Very impressed. The 7TP was actually superior to most German tanks of the period. It had a diesel engine, making it one of the world's first diesel tanks, which meant better fuel efficiency and lower fire risk. It had well-sloped armor, and it had Gundlach's revolutionary periscope. The British wanted the periscope. The most likely explanation is that this was a token payment as part of a larger military cooperation deal. Poland needed British support against Germany. Sharing military technology was a way to cement the alliance. The nominal 1 zloty fee satisfied legal requirements for the patent transfer, while essentially giving the design away as a diplomatic gesture. Vickers Armstrong immediately began production as the Vickers tank periscope. By 1940, it was being installed in virtually every British tank. The Crusader, the Churchill, the Valentine, the Cromwell. British tank commanders in North Africa found that the periscope gave them a crucial edge in the dust and smoke of desert warfare. They could track multiple enemy vehicles, spot flanking movements, and maintain formation visibility in conditions that would have left their predecessors functionally blind. Meanwhile, back in Poland, catastrophe struck. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded from the west. On September 17th, the Soviet Union invaded from the east. The Polish army fought heroically but was overwhelmed. Among the casualties and captured equipment, 7TP, tanks with Gundlach. When Poland fell in 1939, Rudolf Gundlach was one of hundreds of thousands of Poles who escaped to France via Romania. He was 47 years old, a major in the Polish army and suddenly a refugee. In France, he worked for the Polish government in exile, trying to help coordinate war production. But when France fell to Germany in June 1940, Gundlach faced another disaster. Health problems prevented him from evacuating to Britain with many other Polish officers and engineers. He spent the rest of the war in Vichy, France, occupied territory, under constant surveillance, cut off from his family and his homeland. He watched from the sidelines as the war raged. He heard about tanks battling across North Africa, Europe, Russia. He saw photographs of British Cromwells and American Shermans. He read what technical reports he could access, and he realized something that must have burned like acid. His invention was being used by everyone, and he was seeing nothing for it. After the war ended in 1945, Gundlach did something that would define the rest of his life. He hired lawyers and went after patent infringement. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. He had nothing. His home country was now under Soviet control. He couldn't return. His military career was over. He had no pension, no savings, no prospects, but he had patents. Patents registered in multiple countries. Patents that proved he had invented one of the most widely used optical devices in modern military history. The legal battle took years. In the United States, he faced long and costly proceedings that ultimately went nowhere. American courts were not sympathetic to foreign patent claims against defense contractors who had supplied equipment for the war effort. But in Britain, he had more success. In 1947, the British Royal Commission agreed to pay him compensation. The exact amount isn't publicly documented, but it was substantial enough to provide financial relief. The real victory came in France. A French court ruled that Barbier, Bernard et Turenne, a major French optical equipment manufacturer, had used Gundlach's invention without proper compensation. In 1947, the court awarded him 84 million francs. 84 million. After attorney's fees, court costs, and taxes, Gundlach received approximately 17 million francs. At the time, this was equivalent to about $50,000 American dollars. a significant sum that allowed him to buy a villa in Le Vésinet, a suburb near Paris. For the first time since 1939, Rudolf Gundlach had a home. The villa became a gathering place for Polish émigrés in France. Fellow refugees, former soldiers, engineers, and scientists who couldn't return to their Soviet-controlled homeland. They would meet at Gundlach's villa, sharing news, memories, hopes for a Poland that might someday be free again. In 1953, Gundlach did something unexpected. He opened a bakery. Why would a 61-year-old former military engineer open a bakery? Perhaps he simply needed something to do. Perhaps he enjoyed the simple, honest work of making bread. Perhaps after years of weapons and war machines, he wanted to create something that fed people rather than killed them. But age and health were catching up with him. In 1956, he sold the villa and moved to Colombes, another Paris suburb. On July 4, 1957, Rudolf Gundlach died. He was 65 years old. He was buried in the local cemetery in Colombes. No grand monument, no military honors. Just another Polish refugee who died far from home. For decades, his story was largely forgotten. Tank historians knew about the Vickers tank Periscope Mk4, but few connected it to a Polish engineer named Gundlach. In Poland, under communist rule, Western military connections were downplayed. In the West, Polish contributions to Allied victory were often overlooked. It wasn't until the 1990s, after the fall of communism, that Polish historians began researching Gundlach's life and his invention. They found his patents, court records, military files. They interviewed people who had known him. They traced the periscope's spread across all the armies of World War II, and they realized something extraordinary. This one device, invented by one engineer in a small office in Warsaw, had been used by more tank crew members than perhaps any other optical instrument in history. Today, if you visit the Tank Museum in Bovington, UK, you can see examples of Gundlach's periscope. They're displayed alongside the tanks that used them: British Churchills, Soviet markings on captured Mk4s, American M6 periscopes that went ashore at Normandy. The museum staff will tell you, this unassuming device saved thousands of lives. How many tank commanders survived because they could spot an enemy anti-tank gun through the smoke? How many crews avoided ambushes because they could scan 360 degrees in seconds? How many collisions were prevented? How many friendly fire incidents avoided because of better visibility? We'll never know the exact number. But military historians agree. Situational awareness is survival in armored combat. And Gundlach's periscope gave tankers better situational awareness than anything that came before it. The invention remained standard equipment for nearly 5 decades. It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that electronic vision systems, cameras, thermal imaging, digital displays, began to replace the optical periscope on modern tanks. Even today, some armored vehicles still use periscopes based on Gundlach's principles. The design is that good, that reliable, that fundamentally sound. Think about the title of this documentary, How One Engineer's Impossible. Periscope let tankers see through smoke. It's the word impossible that matters. In 1934, when Gundlach proposed a rotating periscope that could maintain image orientation while allowing both forward and rear viewing from a single device, his colleagues said it couldn't be done. The optics were too complicated. The mechanism would be too fragile. It would be too expensive to manufacture, but Gundlach proved them wrong. He showed that impossible problems often just need a different approach, a clever arrangement of prisms, an independent rotation mechanism, a second eyepiece positioned just right. And he showed that engineering innovation doesn't always come from the biggest countries or the wealthiest militaries. It comes from individuals who see a problem, understand it deeply, and refuse to accept that the current solution is good enough. Poland in the 1930s was a small country, caught between two giants scrambling to prepare for a war it knew was coming. It couldn't outbuild Germany or Russia, but it could outthink them. Rudolf Gundlach's periscope is proof of that. So the next time you hear that something is impossible, remember the Polish engineer who gave the world a periscope that could see through smoke, dust, and chaos, who gave tank commanders the gift of vision when the battlefield turned dark. Remember that he sold his patent for 1 zloty, lived to see armies around the world use his invention, fought in courts for recognition, and died quietly in a Paris suburb. Remember Rudolf Gundlach. The engineer who made the impossible possible, one rotation at a time. His periscope didn't just let tankers see through smoke, it let them see the enemy coming. See their comrades nearby, see the obstacles ahead. It let them see tomorrow, and thousands of them lived because of it.